Okay, as people start to arrive, we're going to get started. So my name is Martin Gill and a very warm welcome to our 22nd Security Thought Leadership webinar. And the idea of these thought leadership webinars is to critique what's going on today. What is crystal clear is that in a time of change, in a time of upheaval, there's a chance to learn, there's a chance to think about what's going on in order that we may have a better type of security in the future. So what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to introduce our 4 panelists from around the world, and then I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves, and once they've done that, then I will invite them to make their opening statement. And the topic this week is security officers post-COVID-19, an enhanced role and more of the same. And those of you who've been involved in previous webinars will know there's been some debate about this, about whether this is going to change things in a dramatically important way, or in fact, make no change at all. As some have said, be a retrograde step. So we'll debate those issues with the audience. My grateful thanks to Core Security for supporting this. And just to say one other thing to the audience, at the bottom of your screen, there's a question and answer button. Could I ask you please to ask your questions on that button, using the question and answer button, and we'll endeavour to ask your questions. That's once all the panel have introduced themselves and once we've heard their opening statements. And we'll finish after 45 minutes as normal. It'll be action-packed as always. So let's get started then, introduce our panel. Let me go first to Gary. Gary.
Thank you. Hi all, I'm Gary Evanson. I'm Head of Security at Westminster Abbey. And previously to that, it was De La Rue PLC, which is a completely different organisation. Many years in the Army, and I'm chartered as well. So I bring quite a few different things to the party, but currently it's very much corporate security. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And from Westminster to all the way over to America, the West Coast, to Cy Oatridge. Cy.
Hi guys, Cy Oatridge, CPP, CEO of OSG Security out here in the great northwest of the USA.
Thank you, Cy. And it's been raining there this morning. Now over to Norway and John Sigurd Jacobsen. John.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jon Sigurd Jacobsen, and I'm the Managing Director of SOS Security Company in Norway, which I'm also the owner and entrepreneur. Started this company 40 years ago.
Thank you, John. And then all the way back to the United Kingdom and Mike Bluestone. Mike.
Thank you, Martin. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well and safe. My name is Mike Bluestone. I'm a chartered security professional and director of security consulting at Core Security. I'm also a vice president of the Security Institute and the former chairman. I've spent 30 years in the private security sector, dedicating much of my time to developing training and best practice for clients across both the public and private sectors.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. So what I'm going to do now is ask each of our panel to make their opening statements, 3 minutes, for them to offer their view on this topic. First to Gary.
Well, thanks very much. And first, of course, growing recognition of security value in a crisis. I don't really agree that premise, in fact, because I'm not sure that security has got a growing recognition post-COVID or during COVID. Yes, certainly security guards on the ground have been doing sterling work, and we in the sector appreciate them greatly. However, it's conditional and it's contextual. Money at the end of the day is going to be the huge determinant about how and what shape security takes in the future for most organizations. The perception of the role is going to play into that too, and technology actually could be our worst enemy. And the reason I say that is because although part of the security sector actually focuses on technology, it's usually at the expense of physical security in the sense of people. Quite often it's not sold as complementary to, and quite a lot of misinformation is put about by people who sell technology on the market, trying to get that as the lead-in for their security. I think that's going to cause quite an issue going forward. I think dilution or enhancement of security tasks and guards in the future, I think it could go either way, but mostly I have to be pretty negative on that too. I think if I'm pushed, I'd go for the dilution. It's usually back to basics. Whenever there's financial problems, it's back to basics. And security as a word itself can cause the problem. We haven't moved forward into risk and resilience titles very much, and perhaps that might be to our detriment as a security sector workforce. What might we expect in the future? Well, I think most will be just feel they're lucky to be in work. And I think quite a lot will fear for a while of the virus itself and might affect work situations. Of course, each organisation is going to tackle the prevention problem differently because it's going to go on, presumably, the COVID risk. And we, or possibly the organisation, demands a lot but invests a little. So my bottom line very much will be either status quo maintained, decreased numbers, little investment into security. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Very, very interesting. And don't forget, at the bottom of your screen, question and answers. Please get your questions ready and we'll come to them after all four panelists have made their opening statement. Okay, over to the West Coast then. And Si, your opening statement, please.
I think security officers post-COVID-19 will need to be more nimble. I think they're going to need to walk, talk, ask straightforward questions, all the while assessing the individuals they're talking to. I think in the past, security officers with a strong presence, but yet passive, have been able to work in the industry. Yet, I think going forward, we're going to need our officers to be more engaging with individuals in areas that they're working. I believe that we're going to see more facilities, government installations that we all walk into naturally. Now we're going to see a security officer standing there, and he's going to be screening you, and he's going to be asking you straightforward questions about have you had any symptoms, cough, fever, COVID, anything about COVID-19. And then you're going to see probably one of these, a thermometer. And this is not the thermometer that your mother used to use that she'd put under your tongue or ask you to bend over. This is thermometer they're going to point at your head. You're going to get a temperature 94.6. Wow, I'm running a little cool today. Probably going to have to go in the office. These are the kind of things we're going to see more of post-COVID-19.
Thank you very much indeed, Si. Let's go from Si then over to Norway. And John, your opening statement, please.
Thank you. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk about security, both security officers and the private security industry itself. The security industry, whether we call it an occupation or a profession, will of course be influenced by various impacts and indeed during and post COVID-19. Over the years, the security industry has expanded and changed with the aim to meet both customers and society's requirement and different risks and emergencies. The future of technology will lead to serious changes to the whole security industry in the years to come. This will include rapidly changing threat environments, requirements to be updated on new and available products and software, change in customer habits and needs, need for additional education and increased skills. There is numerous news within product development causing direct influence on the security industry. For example, rapid change and advanced technology for us and for the bad guys, of course, increasingly mobile and changing workforce, and likewise for the bad guys, increased use and access to open and closed softwares, increased drive for transparent open data, a differential and changing supplier chain, offsourcing of services and data. In these COVID-19 circumstances, most of the society are affected by the challenging economic situation. Many of the security industry's current and future customers suffer from a weak economy, as well as parts of the security industry does. Especially the specialized security companies providing security for pubs and clubs, sports, concerts and festivals. Their customers have all been closed down by the government for the last 3 months. The airport transport hub security also experienced the same in the lockdown. When the society turns back to normal, or we will experience a different new normal, we all need to recover, both as security officers and members of the society. We all want to balance our economy, and our customers will try to reduce costs after COVID-19. Question is, will this affect the security industry? Will customers invest in new technology and employ security officers, or will we be forced back to what it was before the crisis, or even less? I think that to introduce security officers to a career path by formal education, which are tailor-made for tomorrow's varied tasks, will be needed in order to strengthen their position. I think that historically the security industry has been seen as low-skilled, low-paid industry where security guards had little to do other than provide physical presence and deterrence. Private security has now become a highly credible industry that can attract and retain a higher caliber of career-minded professionals. This said, I'm convinced that the security officer's role will experience an even larger demand for the future. A scenario post-COVID-19 will hopefully be that the security industry shape a strong, innovative, and enabling security profession that aim to build strong leadership and partnership. That develops recognized standards and qualifications, which there is a lack of at the moment, I think in Norway or Scandinavia, and that provides better career paths, and that improves recruitment, retention, and sharing of highly qualified specialists. This will be my opening statement.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Really appreciate that. So now let's go to Mike Bluestone. And just to say, question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. As soon as Mike's finished, we'll come to your questions. Mike.
Thank you, Martin. I'd like to start off by talking firstly about the word same in the title of the seminar, More of the Same. In that context, I'm really pleased to see that Martin's used the term security officers in this webinar title as opposed to security guards, because that term doesn't really do security officers justice. They're involved in so many business sectors in the public and private side of life and in varying roles, and they're delivering security solutions and contributing to enhance organizational resilience. We see security officers are active as cash and valuable in transit operatives, monitoring CCTV, manning control rooms, door supervisory duties, static and mobile guarding and close protection. But we're increasingly seeing security officers in quasi-policing roles, some enhanced with community safety accreditation scheme powers as park security officers, street wardens, and even railway security officers. The UK's 360,000 contract security officers are to be found pre-COVID and post-COVID-19 in security sectors and environments where the risk of injury or worse is often high, such as the retail sector or hospital A&E departments, both being very high-risk environments for security officers. They get injured, they get knocked about, and yet they save lives. Yes, they save lives. My company is not alone in a sector where security officer colleagues have saved lives by using defibrillators or preventing a distressed person from jumping off a tall building. Does any of that sound like low-skill activity? And because that's the picture often painted in the media of low-skill activity, people often forget that possession of skills is only one type of competency. Experience and knowledge are equally important, which many security officers possess in bucket loads. And of course, the changing work landscape that's emerged during the current crisis has seen our security officers get engaged in hands-on health and safety functions that Si and John alluded to, whether it be using thermal temperature detection devices, enforcing social distancing, both being sensitive roles which require specialist training and customer care skills. For example, refusing access to a senior director or other senior person at a customer site access point because they present COVID symptoms on an electronic device has to be handled very carefully, which is why customer care training is so vital. Of course, historically, the Private Security Industry Act in this country in 2001 was very weak on the mandatory training requirements for licensable persons. But quality contractors will be providing officers with additional training via a combination of classroom-based and e-learning courses. Of course, security, we've got 26 e-learning courses available for officers to take online, including those developed specifically to cover COVID, the health and safety implications, and the use of technology. So, in conclusion, I firmly believe that the role of security officers has evolved, and the enhanced skills and, importantly, the experience gained during the current crisis has evidenced that change. The role of security officers is one of the essential roles which has been a constant during the COVID crisis. Security officers have remained on the front line, taking care of people and corporate assets, and have maintained this constant presence during the crisis despite all the challenges and threats. I'd like us to celebrate that and acknowledge and continue to encourage and support them to develop. And finally, no matter how sophisticated the technology that we're going to be using, it will always require human intervention to find the ultimate solution to what's ever happening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to come to Si first, a question directly for you, Si. One from Erica Gibbons, who asked, why would you use security officers to take the temperature when health and safety officers, for example, or people in other roles might be more relevant? And Georgia Jackson, also a question, says, do you envisage the need for security officers to provide a COVID-19 management role, including your temperature checking, having a detrimental effect on their ability to deliver traditional security objectives? In other words, it's diverting people away from the sorts of skills that they've been good at, and they wouldn't be good at these. Si first.
Well, that's a great question. I think that we've discovered over the last 2 months, though, that the professionals in each industry need to stay in their lane, as far as we only have so much capacity for doctors, almost have so many nurses, and they are being maximum capacity working in their location. So when you come into a facility, you're going to need somebody other than those professionals. It doesn't take a lot of training to operate a thermometer. And the other part of that is you need somebody that can stand, ask good questions, check the thermometer. And if somebody, if there's possibly a concern there with the individual coming in, they can direct them to exit the building.
Okay. Same question, I think, to you, John. There is this view, and Stewart Mansfield has picked up on this in his question, which is the danger is that once we start moving away from traditional security duties, however good it may look, it provides a dilution of the security role. And indeed, this move towards the sense that its competence and skill task becomes less obvious to portray and less obvious in reality. John, do you think that's a danger with these sort of moves?
Yes, of course it is. And I think that we need to state as COVID-19 is a disease, it is not a crime. And because of most people think that the security industry deals with crime and disorder, which is a police task. I think that it's quite unclear what we are doing at the moment. We are going closer and closer to the health and safety industry and the health workers. But we need to address the fact that the crowd safety management role is to make people safe also from their own illness. So I think that our role as security officer is to plan and implement as well and create plans for reopening during the COVID-19 crisis.
Thank you. Mike, I'll come to you on this. It's an interesting point, isn't it, Mike? And Captain Jostri from India sent a question in advance. And he was just making the point that the security sector is now being invited to do things that it wasn't trained to do. Isn't there a real danger this could be a retrograde step?
I think that, you know, I personally have always seen security officers' role as being primarily to look after the security and resilience of assets. But the role is evolving, and there's a huge emphasis on customer care. And that varies from different environments. It'll vary from an office to a hospital A&E department to university. But I think the training piece is extremely important. It's absolutely wrong to deploy anyone unless they've undergone training for a particular issue. But I think John is absolutely right that there's going to be a greater switch, not a switch, but a combination of security and during the course of this crisis, an emphasis on health and safety issues. Because actually when someone presents themselves with COVID symptoms, trying to gain access to somewhere, denying access can be quite a sensitive issue, which can then develop into a security matter, especially if they start getting upset and things become tense. So I think it's inevitable that security officers will be involved, but there's also a responsibility on our customers to make sure that they have a responsible person available that can oversee things if they get a little bit heated or out of hand.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. And I might come to that in a minute. Gary, an interesting observation you made, and I thought some interesting points. And Simon Pears has a question which says, do you not see it as the industry responsibility, so his side, to provide you as a client with the right solution, which may include technology and in turn security officers becoming better technically skilled, recognised and valued? In other words, it's an industry responsibility. Or is it, Gary, the fact that you hold the purse strings and what you decide you will pay for, you appreciate, I'm meaning in the corporate sector, is the type of security that's going to be provided. And they're in a recession that doesn't look good. Gary, your thoughts?
I think that's a polar look at it. I think there's both parts of that come into play. I mean, what it is comes down to what a user wants. A user will say, I need to secure my premises or my perimeter, or I need to secure these assets. If you are on the outside as a security either advisor, consultant or a provider, you're going to look at it in the round with a survey and say, well, I think this would suit you, having listened to what your needs are. And it might be a mixture of technology, it might be a mixture of people, it might be just one or the other. But invariably it's going to be the mixture, and it's going to be by consultation with a person who needs the security and the provider. It's not a polar situation. So I don't see the issue there, other than if the provider is trying to actually sell one thing only rather than what should be a good piece of advice. So I think that's, yeah.
Gary, but from your sort of thinking about your peer group for a minute, to what extent do you think they have the status in their organisations to argue the case for security in the harsh realities of business life in a likely recession? I mean, it has been said before that the problem is that corporate security professionals have less status than their peers, and that's a bad position to be in to argue for resources when they're going to get scarcer.
Yeah, my previous response was very much looking at an external provider. If you're looking at security in-house with security management in place, then you've got possibly a better situation or a worse situation depending on the culture of the organization. If you have an organization that sees it purely as a pull on the resources and money, then they're going to try and drive security down as much as possible, purely from a fiscal driver basis. The security management still got to provide the best solution that suits the company within the resources that are there. It's not necessarily against the risk of that organization, unfortunately. In reality, it's going to be very much driven by both money and culture of the organization, followed by need. Not people like to hear that, but it's a truism. And until the security either provider or the management within that organization get to grips with the culture and the money problem and get a foothold in the powerhouse of the organization, they're always going to be at the bottom end of that ladder, which is a very unfortunate but true aspect of security.
Thank you, Gary. I'm going to come to Si. Si, a question for you, and then I'll come to John with the same question. It's from Sharon Hay, who asks, what legal implications might organisations be exposing security officers to when implementing COVID-related risks? I just wonder whether this had cropped up in your side of the world, Si. Change role, but changing legal implications. Just for example, if they get the temperature wrong or they misdirect it. Your thoughts, Si?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. The liability exposure can go very deep on this subject. We have, what is the implication if a security officer lets a COVID-19 patient in their facility and infects people? In the US, that's still yet to be unknown. Obviously, it's incredibly difficult to get insurance for that. But I think this is a reason why we need to make sure that our security officers have better training, clearer thinking, and assessing things faster, yet while having good customer skills to avoid these kind of litigious situations.
So from you as a security provider, obviously you own the company, so a good person to ask, how much of a worry is this? You can't get insurance and potentially a biggie.
Well, if I worried about that, I probably wouldn't be able to sleep at night. So I think it just kind of goes along with the trail. There's some things you have to accept are going to be a risk, and you try and mitigate those risks as well as you can to prevent legal situations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Si. John, you're in the same boat. If I can ask you just very quickly the same question. Do you sleep at night worrying about this?
I sleep at night, yes, but I think it's quite important that we acknowledge that our employees are our best asset, and we need to take care of them as good as we can. And in the reopening of the countries, we expose them to risk in the same way that the health personnel in hospitals do. We could meet in less than 1 meter social distance, 1,000 people every day. And the risk for being ill is quite large. So we do have a quite rigorous plan, and we use gloves and face masks and whatever we can do to protect our people. We will use the thermometer with no touch. And if any of our staff measure more than 38 degrees Celsius, they will be sent home. They will have their sick money, because we need to take care of those who are willing to stand in the forefront of this terrible situation. And I think that it's quite important as well that we don't only say it's all the others, it's the audience, it's the guests, it's the travelers that get affected. No, it's also the head of the companies we are working for, and what happens if they get sick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. I'm going to move on. I'm going to come to you next, Mike. You were outlining the various ways in your opening statement that security is developing. I've got a question here from Sheraz Hussain. And it slightly lends itself to Gary's point, which is that the development in technology is a double-edged sword. We tend to applaud it, but there's certainly problems with it. The question is, will thermal cameras be installed to remove the security officers from the picture in this? Can technology, in fact, developing so fast, replace the role of security, or at least take over a lot of its functions? Mike.
It's a good question. I don't think that it's one or the other. I think that the technology is necessary during this crisis. We may even find that post the peak of the crisis, as we move from recovery into what people are calling the new normal, it may be that these devices will still be there, in the background, in reserve, to be used for spikes, for potential spikes in the disease. But I think that because, as I said earlier, because security officers are present on sites as a constant, and if we look at what's happening at the moment, even buildings and premises, environments that are emptied of people, still have security officers there. So they are the one constant. And actually, it's my experience that security officers enjoy a challenge. They actually like to do something new. I can see no real problem at all, provided there's the right training and implementation of best practice and procedures, that security officers can't be there, operate this equipment with, as I said earlier, some oversight from the customer to make sure that when there are contentious issues, they're resolved peacefully and amicably. But I don't think that, just by having this technology, it's going to mean that security officers are going to be out of the loop. On the contrary, they will have more to do, and I think things that they will actually enjoy doing.
Thank you. Gary, you introduced this, so it's only fair to give you a very quick comment on this. I mean, in some ways, that's your point, isn't it? That there's a real danger here that in applauding technology as unqualified good, we're perhaps not understanding some of the implications. Gary?
Yeah, I'm much more in Mike's camp on this, in the sense that there's got to be an interplay between the two and a balance is struck. For some organizations, a heavy reliance on technology is inevitable. But for most organizations, it should major on people aided by technology. Each horses for courses, not everywhere is the same, but if you just go 100% technology and systems and remote everything, at the end of the day, cameras can't jump off a wall and arrest somebody. That's what it really comes down to at the end of the day. So both things in unison and in balance, I suspect, is the answer to go.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'm going to come to you, because a question from Carl Parrott, which is talking about one of the sad things is that many clients and companies don't have the personal protection equipment for their security officers, and that some have passed away as a consequence due to COVID-19. This has been a big issue, actually, in many countries, as we found out from previous webinars. So just a quick comment, since it's mentioned America as a case in point. Does this remain an issue for securities officers on the front line? And if so, what's the other way of dealing with it? Is there a way? Si?
As far as using equipment, Martin?
Yes, getting and using. Getting.
Yeah, I don't see it as a problem. I see it as a benefit as far as companies that have used both at the same time get more bang for their buck. I think, as Gary was saying, off the wall, the cameras don't jump off the wall and do things. It's very, my thought goes to the equipment needs to be run by somebody. The people that install it are not going to operate it and show you how to. We need the security officers there trained and prepared to use the equipment. And I see that as our industry evolves, the security officers, just not post-COVID-19, but in all aspects, need to become stronger technology-wise and be able to use equipment that can benefit the situation they're in.
And so, in your general impression, are security officers up for that? I mean, we're speaking in general terms, and I appreciate that's always tricky in this area, but is your sense that as an industry in the United States, they're able and in a position to make a good job of that?
I think that this post-COVID-19, we're going to start seeing more of an investment in the security officers to have those skills, to gain those skills, to bring that to the table. Skills, not just assess things, but be stronger technology-wise to operate and make quicker decisions and be more of a preventative operative.
Thank you very much indeed. Mike, I'll come to you next. There's been quite a lot of talk around this on the whole use of the word guard and security officer. And we had Bonnie Michaelman on the debate the other day, who was being quite critical of the word. And Sandy Davis was on a previous webinar. She's made the same point. The question is, we've also had someone from Africa who was saying, but that's what we call them over here. We call them guards, that it's not derogatory, it's just what they're called. Yeah. And Brian Sims' point is, how do we move to a new terminology? Much discussed, a lot of people saying it, not much happens, that word's still in common parlance.
I think it's like languages evolve, don't they? And even the language in security evolves. I mean, some years ago, you wouldn't have heard the word resilience being used, but Gary's used it, I've used it, other colleagues have used it today, because that's an evolution of language and of concept. The fact is that you can't call them security guards because they're doing more than guarding, they're securing. And when they're not securing, they're engaging in customer care. And when they're engaging in customer care, they're also ambassadors for the environments in which they're actually placed and doing their job. So it is demeaning just to call them guards, because, you know, is a guy sitting in a control room, a licensed operative monitoring cameras? Is he a guard? He's not. He's a security operative. And his colleagues out there on the front line doing the mobile and static stuff as security officers. So I think the more we resolve to use the correct language to describe our colleagues, the more there will be acceptance that those are the right terms to use. John,
Norway, do you agree that security officer should be used instead of guard, and in fact guard is derogatory?
Yeah, I agree with Mike, but also I think that when it's so much confusion about the words and the meaning inside us who are in the industry, how can we expect that the public will understand who we are and what tasks we do?
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to move on, a lot to get through. Gary, I'm going to come to you. And one of the questions that has cropped up in a number of contexts is whether in a recession, there's going to be the enthusiasm to invest in the sorts of issues that are going to become important on the front line. And PPE is one, training is another, upskilling. And the question is not whether security suppliers are committed to supplying it, but what the arguments will be that persuade the corporate security departments that security officers count too. Couple of points on this. Just a very quickly, if you wouldn't mind, Gary, your thoughts.
Normally, I'm usually at the other end of these arguments and actually fighting back on things, but actually, I don't think there's too much of an issue there. A lot will depend on the organisation's risk assessments about COVID, and COVID will be the drive, post-COVID, it'll be the driver for how they want to shape themselves with the money aspect. Those two things will determine the shape of not only the security force that's within their organisation, but also the organisation itself as a whole. In my own organisation, security is not seen as any different. We don't call our security guards, we call our security beadles, which is a historic term, and therefore I don't have to worry too much about that element. But going forward, security is still going to be on the back foot as a function rather than the individual organisation. Either security organisation within the company. And the reason I say that is because money will determine how it goes forward, with a little bit of risk analysis involved, but mostly COVID requirements as well. And if that works for the organisation, that they want a little bit more security, they'll put it in. If it doesn't, they won't. Money will be the driver.
Thank you very much indeed. Question, I'll go to Mike Bluestone next. Ian Griffin. Do we need a standard for using PPE technology in dealing with people in close proximity? And if so, should it be insurance companies, as they will be insuring people? Or perhaps on this issue they won't. Mike, it's a big question. It's a good question.
It is a big question. And as you know, as colleagues know, that developing things like British standards and international standards, it takes a time. I mean, I've led a panel on developing a standard. It took 3 years. And of course, this whole business of PPE now with COVID and the crisis is a new phenomenon for us. What I suspect is that in relatively short time, we may see that there's a public available standard, a PAS that's developed by the BSI or another organization. In the meantime, it's incumbent upon quality providers of security services to develop their own in-house benchmarking and standards, which at the end of the day will shape whatever comes out in the long term in terms of a British standard or international standard.
Is that likely, Mike?
It's possible. It really depends. I guess it depends on whether I don't want to use a government term, being guided by the science. It depends whether the forecast is that we can expect, more spikes in this particular disease and more diseases, pandemics of this kind in terms of the contagion. I don't think we can afford to be complacent. So I think we have to start thinking about these type of standards now. But I think the important thing in the meantime is for quality companies to present these procedures and policies and benchmarking in conjunction with clients and customers, and to pave the way for whatever may come in formal standards.
I guess the good companies, it'll be a point of difference. Question, Si, for you from Glenn Kitteringham, and former panelist, and he makes an interesting point, actually, Si. I'll read the first part of his question. It's quite a long one, just the first part. To date, the vast majority of actions taken by government and the private sector are what he calls fear-based decision-making. Others have mentioned to me that it's been decisions made on the hoof. And I guess the question he's asking is whether that's correct, or I'll ask that, and whether that we need to move to a point about more thought through decision making. Sandy Davis is actually calling for more research in this area. Si, do you think that the sorts of decisions made are fear-based, that they haven't been thought through, and that we might later found out to be they need refining somewhat dramatically? Si?
Yes, I agree with what Glenn is saying there. I've always tried to preach that we need to be proactive and not reactive. And a lot of the decisions now that I see being made are based on fear and reactionary to where they need to be thought through deeper. We need to take a deeper dive, and we need to be less fear-based and more proactive in our decision process making to be more preventative.
Gary, I just asked you the same question about the way decisions are being made, perhaps from your side or the other side of the coin, as it were.
I think the initial reaction, if it depends on the time frame and compression that goes on. If you've got a good lead-in time to problems, then I think a much more rational setup ensues, a bit like a business continuity setup and post-incident. But if you've got compression involved, time compression, then I think fear and that make for bad decisions. So I think, again, each company is going to be slightly different how it's set up and prepared for things like COVID. But I'm with the majority, I suspect, that saying fear has had too much of an influence on the way decisions have been made, rather than sitting back and being more rational about the way security or any other organisational function is set up.
Thank you very much indeed. John, I'm going to come to you very quickly, if I might. And Barry Millett has asked a question about whether you think that we need, in fact, in terms of understanding operational requirements, not talk about security officers in isolation, but this is about a holistic approach. Perhaps it overlaps the previous question about thinking slightly differently about the problem. John, very quickly, if you wouldn't mind your thoughts on Barry's question.
Well, I don't know exactly what to say about this, but we have a very, very complex situation for us all. And I think that individuals will take different decisions in whatever they have to decide. And I would like to go back to the fear. I think that the politicians, the health government, and the media make us really afraid. So what we do is very much based on what the media tells us.
And you see, and are the media influencing practice out there in Norway? Are the media heavily influencing what's going on the ground?
Oh yeah, but they always would like to cover what is negative, and that's create even more fear.
Do you know, interestingly, John, I was just speaking to Barry Millett before this webinar about this very issue about media impressions. Okay, we have got so many questions. It's been absolutely inundated, always a good sign. We're running out of time. I'm going to ask each of my panelists for their final comments on this issue about the role of security officers and where we go next. Gary, your final comments, please, just in 20 seconds, if you wouldn't mind, Gary.
Okay, there's no one size fits all here. And given the complexity and diversity of all the organisations out there that need security, it's going to be very much down to certain factors. The main one is going to be money. That will drive the way, plus their needs as they see them. And it's up to the security industry to actually respond to that in the best possible way with professionalism and education, to actually make sure that they can present themselves in the best possible light and also accrue their proportion of the requirement within that organisation.
Gary, thank you very much indeed. Si, your final comments, please, if you wouldn't mind, in just 20 seconds.
I think there's nothing like a world crisis to put the spotlight on the security industry and the security officer. And I think this scenario puts the importance of us increasing the professionalism of our officers and each other.
And do you think they're going to come out at the end of the day, Si? I mean, are you positive about the impact this will have on the role of the security officer?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Let me go next to John. John, your final comments, please. Just 20 seconds, if you wouldn't mind, John.
I think that the security industry has a great and bright future, but I think that we need formal educations, and formal education goes forward to a place at the board, and then you can be deciding what to do with the crisis. Because now we are just told what to do, because amongst them, the finance directors, he decided what to spend on the security, and that would never be very, very fair to what we are up to.
John, thank you very much indeed. We didn't get into education. I know quite a few questions on that, including from Mike Hurst, but perhaps another time. Finally, it seems only appropriate, Mike, to leave the final comment to you. Just 20 seconds, if you wouldn't mind, Mike.
Well, I think the crisis has really shown how security officers play such a huge role in the whole resilience concept. And whilst I agree with Gary and other speakers about the whole money piece, it's not just about the money, but about looking through the right lens as to how you spend that money. So even if your budget is not the same or it's decreased, look carefully at the best value that you can get for your money in terms of combining people with technology.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. Thank you very much indeed to all the panel. What is clear is that at this time, security is in a period when the world is changing, and there aren't many of these. And clearly there will be winners and losers. It strikes me the opportunity here is for those who are really good to have a chance to excel. So I'm very grateful, thanks to my panel and to Core Security for sponsoring it, and indeed for our other supporters. When we talk about excellence, by the way, just to let you know, the OSPA nominations are open around the world. And if you know a good team, who's good at what they do in the security world, a good individual, a good initiative, or a good company, I would encourage you to make a nomination. Being good at security is not an idle issue. It has fundamental implications for so many in so many different locales. And we need to identify who's outstanding. In India, the United States, Benelux, Kenya, Romania, Australia, and UK. Look out, it opens on the 1st of July. Finally, just to let you know, everyone know, that we go through it again every Tuesday and Thursday, 45 minutes of debate. And on next Tuesday, we'll be looking at resuming effective business operations post-Covid-19. What role changes for security and business continuity, if any? And that whole subject of business continuity and the relationship to security has been an ongoing and highly debatable one. Hopefully you'll join me for another international panel where we'll be debating the issues and thinking through the implications. So once again, my grateful thanks to my panel, my grateful thanks to the audience and your many questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to them all. To Christine and Hannah in the background to orchestrate all this. And wherever you are in the world, hope to see you on Tuesday. Meanwhile, stay safe.